Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all. How are you all today? Very good. Is it super hot outside yet? Oh, I was hoping it wouldn't be. Oh, well. Who knew it would be this way in June? What are you going to do? Anyways, all right. So today we are here, and I am thrilled that we're all here. I'm thrilled that I get to be a part of this. We've spent the last month or so talking about parables. And if you'll recall, these parables are these stories that Jesus would tell, and he would tell them to help us give an understanding of who he is, who God is, of what it looks like to live life following Christ, what it looks like to live in this kingdom of God that he's constantly talking about. And so we've gone through, I think, 4 or 5 weeks in 4 or 5 different parables. And so we're going to do that again today, and we're going to find ourselves eventually in the book of Matthew. We'll be in the book of Matthew, chapter 18, and it's going to start. We'll get there in a little bit, but I do want to just tell you how this all starts. Where we'll find ourselves today is Peter just simply approaching Jesus with kind of a straightforward and simple question. And it's this question: Lord, how many times shall my brother sin against me and I still forgive him? Up to 7 times? And so in response to this question, Jesus is going to tell a parable, and he's going to tell this parable about this king and these 2 servants that the king has. And what we're going to see is how the dynamic between the king and his 2 servants, how that plays out, is going to give us this really important picture of the role and value of forgiveness in the world today, in our lives, in the lives of the people around us, and just what it does for the world around us as we walk through life, and how forgiveness plays a role in that. However, before we get to that, before we get to a story that Jesus tells, I have my own story to share. Not nearly as good, but I do have my own story to share, and it helps set up kind of where we're going today. So years ago, I used to play in an adult, I was in my 20s or so, I used to play in this adult co-ed soccer league. And it was really a soccer league where, we would get together, those of us who enjoyed soccer, loved playing soccer, would get together and be able to play and have some friendly games, and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't like we were, trying out for any sort of national team. It wasn't like we were going pro. It was just some people who loved playing soccer together. And so usually what that meant is that the games were a lot of fun most of the times. It was fun to go, and no one took it super seriously. And we just got to, again, just kind of enjoy playing soccer. But every now and then there were games that I hated being a part of. Because for some reason, the team that we were playing must have felt like if they had won this game, they get promoted to the Premier League. And they would get promoted to they're trying out for the national team, and they are going as hard as they can, and they are vicious, and they are playing rough and tumble and dirty. And I can remember a particular game where it felt like this team just wasn't going to stop, playing as hard, not as hard as they could. That's fine, but they were just playing rough, and they were throwing elbows, and I was getting knocked down left and right, and I was getting more and more angry. My teammates are getting knocked down left and right, and these people are coming in and they're taking us out. And I'm by halftime, you can't tell if I'm the Incredible Hulk or me, because I'm just stained green from the grass that I've been thrown around in so many times. And I've got, blood coming off my arms, and I'm just like, this is ridiculous. And it would have been better had the ref, the person who is paid to maintain order and rule in that particular game, had felt that was what he should be doing. And instead, he was just watching and enjoying the carnage. And so I am getting more and more angry, more and more frustrated, because I am just getting beat up, and I know I'm going to be hurt and bloody and all that sort of stuff. And the game is coming out. We're about halfway through through the second half, and there is a scrum in the box in front of the other team's goal. So we're on the verge of maybe scoring, and we're going, and the ball kind of comes towards me, and I'm getting ready, and I'm running towards it, and I'm ready to load up and kick it and hopefully score a goal. And out of nowhere, a man the size of a silverback gorilla comes at Mach 12 and runs into me and sends me skidding a good 5-6 feet across the grass. Like I was picking grass out of my ears and my nose for like a week and a half afterwards. And finally, it was as if the heavens opened and the Holy Spirit, like a dove, descended upon the referee, and he blew a whistle. And justice and rightness were made, or so I thought. And so he blows a whistle and he calls a foul, and it's a foul in the penalty box, which means a great thing. It means that I get a free penalty shot. They all got to clear out, and it's just me and that goalie, one-on-one, mano a mano. And at this point, I am so mad. I am just like each and every person on this team deserves to be slide tackled until, they are bleeding from the back of the calf, which is not a Christian thing to say, but I'm just gonna say it anyways, because that's what I felt, and this is an honest place. And so I am so mad, and so I get to take a penalty shot. Now I wanna give you some context for what happens next. If you're not a big soccer player, or maybe you are, you just don't know how, the measurements of everything, a soccer goal is 24 feet wide. That's a lot of feet. It's a lot of feet. A soccer ball is 9 inches in diameter. That is far less than a lot of feet. Can we all agree on that? That is a fairly, comparatively speaking, that's a small thing with a lot of space to go at. And so I have set up here in front of me a free kick where I can aim for a whole 24 feet. Now, granted, there's a goalie there, so let's say, I looked it up, the average person is about 16 inches across, and so, so there's about 24 feet minus 16 inches, if we're getting real technical here. So, but still, that's what, like 22 and a half feet, something like there. I went to seminary, not math school, so just trust me, it's right there. And so there is a lot of space. Can we agree on that? Like, this should not be that complicated. I should be able to have, just be able to make this goal. But the problem is I am angry and bitter and enraged. And so I come up with this brilliant plan. And this plan is going to be this. Rather than go to any of the open spaces in the goal, what I am going to do is I am going to kick the ball as hard as I can directly at the goalie's head. This is with malice and forethought, by the way. Because here's what I'm thinking. One of two things is going to happen. A, he is going to be in such a state of fear at this comet coming towards him that he will dive out of the way, valuing his life more than the score. That's one option. Or the other option, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'm being absolutely serious that this was something that went through my mind, was that he is going to try and stand in front of said comet, and it is going to blow him back. The power of my kick is going to blow him back into the goal. And you guys aren't grasping this. I literally, as a grown man, sat there and thought that I could make something straight out of Looney Tunes happen. I think this needs to sink in with everybody here. And so either way, I figure I just kick this thing as hard as I can, and it's good. And so I am, again, full of rage, just ready to do this. And I'm going to unleash hell on this poor human being. And the ref blows the whistle. The angels start singing the theme from Chariots of Fire. It's an amazing moment. And I take my approach, and I get ready to kick. And I am expecting and I am planning for this ball to rocket off my foot with the power and velocity of something shot out of a howitzer. And what happens instead is, as it leaves my foot, it looks like some small child has shot one of those knockoff Nerf guns. And the ball just kind of, And the goalie literally could have walked over, gotten a drink of water, blown his nose, walked to the other side just to make sure that the net was all good, then walked back, stand in the exact spot where he was previously, not move a centimeter, and he just caught the ball. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I scored the goal or not, but here's the thing. Here's why this all happened. It's because I let my focus on the wrongs and the injustices that had been done to me throughout that day, throughout that moment. I let those take over. And in doing so, I let those wrongs and those injustices and the things that I was angry and bitter about actually bind me up and bind me to this idea of what I thought this person deserved for what they had done to me. And I actually robbed myself of the opportunity to live and explore in the fullness of what was possible. And you see, the thing is ultimately, again, not scoring a goal, that's no big deal. Like, I was bummed, but life went on. It doesn't impact the direction or the shape of the story of my life dramatically. It doesn't impact the relationships that I have with others. We're all fine after that. However, what I do know is that when we find ourselves holding on to the wrongs that have been done to us, focusing on all the things that we are upset about and angry that this person has done, that person has said, and focusing on how that they should pay. We are so bitter that they need to pay and they need to make things right and they need to feel the hurt and the pain. When we focus on that, that does dramatically impact what our lives are like. That does dramatically impact the world around us and how we function and engage with the people around us and how they experience us. And it will impact my life in such a way that it's not for the better. And so when I thought about that, and I think about that now, I'm gonna invite you to think about that as well. I'm gonna ask you, how many goals in life have you missed because you were unable to let go of the wrong that had been done to you? You were so upset and so bitter and so angry that you missed the fullness and freedom of what was in front of you. How do you respond when somebody upsets you? When somebody says something or doesn't say something and you think they should? When somebody does something or doesn't do something and it rubs you the wrong way and it makes you angry? Think about your own life for a second. Who is somebody in your life that you struggle to forgive? Did a face pop up? Maybe not. Well, what if we think about it this way, our lives this way? What is something that you struggle to forgive? Is there a thing, something that's been done, a particular thing that just gets you and you have a hard time forgiving because of that? Maybe it's your boss or your coworkers. You've been working hard, putting in long hours, doing lots of great work, and they just seem to ignore that. Maybe it's a friend or a family member and they've said something wrong. They've embarrassed you in front of the other people. They've done something that impacts the relationship negatively. I want to know if this is a thing. Are there places or things that you don't go to or things you don't go to because of who's going to be there? Have you ever, how you know this? If your first response when somebody says, hey, let's go out to this place, do you say, will this person be there? That's probably a good indication that maybe there's something that we're holding on to there. And here's the thing. I know that's not the life I want. And I know that's not the life you want, and I wouldn't want that for you. And even more so, I know that at the end of the day, that's not the life that God wants for any of us. Because he's got something far bigger, more beautiful, and just expansive than holding on to that. So what I want to talk about today is that what to do when we feel like we've been wronged. Because whenever we've been wronged, whenever we feel like we've been wronged, there are two options in front of us, two paths, if you will. And one path is the path of bitterness, hanging on to things, letting it eat at us. And the other path would be the path of forgiveness. And so my hope for all of us, for you and me and all of us, is that we choose that forgiveness path, because that's the path that reflects the heart of God. It reflects it for us, and it reflects the heart of God for the people in our lives. And so I told you we were going to be looking at this parable this morning, and now we get to jump into it. So we're in Matthew chapter 18, verse 21. And we'll start there, and this is the verse that we've already read. As we go through this, give us a little bit more context, a little bit more what's beneath the thing there to help us maybe capture something that we don't miss or that we don't grasp on first reading. So verse 21, then Peter came and said to him being Jesus, Lord, how often shall I forgive my brother shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? So let me read that again in the correct way. How often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? And so a little background here, just a brief background, is so rabbinic discussion at that time. The discussion that was happening in the Jewish world at that time and the Jewish leaders was, how many times should we forgive before we can just say no more? Before we no longer do that and we start holding it against people. And rabbinic discussion had kind of settled on the number 3. So in that time, it was, after 3 times, if a person, wounds you 3 times, offends you 3 times, does something, after 3 times, you don't do it anymore. You hold it against them. And here comes Peter, and I don't know why he chose him. I tend to think he's like, you know what? We've been following this guy Jesus around. He's been saying we live differently than the rest of these people, that it's a little bit different. So I bet, check this out, guys. It's not 3, it's 7. I mean, right? It's more, right? 7. And so he goes to Jesus and he says, Jesus, is it 7 times? And essentially what he's saying is like, look, I know we're supposed to forgive a lot, more than most, right? But at some point, right, Jesus, there's a limit. There's got to be a limit at some point, right, Jesus? And the thing going on here is that he's asking the wrong question. And here's why. Because by asking this question, what he is doing, he's not actually focusing on the forgiveness, he's focusing on the wrongdoing. Right? He's saying, how long do I have to put up with this wrongdoing before I don't? How long do I have to forgive this wrongdoing before I get to actually hold it against somebody? It's the wrong question. I mean, it's nice that he's wanting to do it more than normal, but still it's the wrong question. And so Jesus, as Jesus does, comes back in and starts to set things straight. And Jesus says in verse 22, Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. And some of you, if you're reading along, some of your Bibles may have 77 times. It's just different translations translated a little bit differently. But the point is, it doesn't mess up the point. Because the point is that Jesus is not throwing out math problems to Peter. He is not asking Peter to, okay, do the math and figure out, how many times do I actually have to do it? That number essentially is it's a symbolic number. It's a number that says, you know what, Peter, you're asking, when do we stop? When do we get to hold it, the grudge? When do we stop the forgiveness? And he says, let me tell you, infinity. How many times do you forgive? Unlimited. And the profound thing that Jesus is communicating here to Peter is that he looked at him and he says, Peter, it's not about the number of times that we forgive. It's not about how much we forgive, but it's about the fact that our way of being is to forgive. Numbers don't matter in this, Peter, because it's the very core of who we are, is that we forgive, because that's what my kingdom looks like. And then he launches into our parable for the day. In verse 23, he begins, and we'll go through, verse 26. And he launches in this parable, and in this parable, before we start, I did want to say one thing, is that what we see him doing is he's setting up 2 competing realities. He's setting up 2 different worlds, essentially, that we can live in. One is a world where we do forgive, and one is a world where we don't forgive. One is a way of living that follows a path of forgiveness, and one is a way of living that follows a path of bitterness. And so then he says, let me tell you this parable, because this will help clarify what this means here, Peter. And so verse 23, and we'll go through again, like I said, 26. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he had begun to settle them, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. But since he did not have the means to repay, his Lord commanded him to be sold along with his wife and children and all that he had, and repayment to be made. So the slave fell to the ground and prostrated himself before him. He falls on his face. He is begging, face in the dirt in front of this king, in front of his master. And he falls to the ground before him saying, have patience with me and I will repay you everything. So now if you were here last week, you recall, Glenn talked about a denarii, right? And if you weren't, we'll catch up on that. It's very simple. A denarii was a monetary unit in those days, and it essentially was 1 day's worth of work. It was a coin that covered 1 day's worth of work. A talent, so remember, this says this man's debt is 10,000 talents. A talent is worth roughly 6,000 denarii. This is an absurd debt this man has. To do a little bit of math, again, not my strong suit, but I went and did it anyways. To do a little bit of math, this works out to 10,000 talents at 1 talent per 6 is equals 6,000 days of work. As best as I can tell, this works out to roughly 160,000 years worth of debt. You thought your car payment was long. This man, I don't even know how this happens. That's not the point. How did this happen? The point here is that there is no possible way this man could earn this off. The king could say, fine, whatever, earn it off, start paying me. And there is no possible way he would get there. 160,000 years. And so what we have here in this moment is that the master has a choice in front of him. Which path am I going to choose? Am I going to choose this path of bitterness that is going to cause me to say, everything you owe me and more you pay up for, you have violated an agreement, whatever it may be, you deserve what you get, bitterness? Or is he going to choose the path of forgiveness? And what we see in verse 27 is the choice that he made. And he says this, and the Lord of that slave felt compassion and released him and forgave the debt. The master chooses the path of forgiveness. And how does he do that? How does he do that? What is it that lets him step down that path of forgiveness? It's that, I'm going to point us to that word compassion there. You see, compassion, when we look at how they would have experienced compassion, how they would have understood compassion, it's probably very much similar to how we understand it and experience. It's how they might say his heart went out to him. He began to feel sympathy and empathy for this person in front of him. This person, there's no way he can earn it off. He's about to lose his family. But at the same time, he looks at him, and this is not just a slave, not just a servant. This is a human being who has cares, who has wants, who has a family, who has a life, who wants to see good things happen for him. And so the master, rather than saying, and he could have said, all right, fine, you can go and pay it off. But rather than saying, go ahead, stay out of prison, try and work it off, instead he does something entirely different. He says, okay, that's fine. Let's just wipe the slate clean. When I look at you and I see you and I feel for you, I realize, here's what I want to do. I just want to wipe the slate clean. I don't even want to hold the debt anymore. No conditions. You just get to go. No, pure and utter freedom. Just go. And there's a reason why it's so important we don't miss that. Because it's something that flows out of the master's very being of who he is. Because it comes from inside of him. And Jesus is painting this picture of what path will you take? What's the world that we're going to live in? And it's a world where compassion is who we are. It comes from inside of us, from deep within us, and it flows out of us. It's who God is. It's who his very being is compassion. And so we get to take that same path. And the other thing that I don't want us to overlook here is this word forgive. He released him and forgave him his debt. The Greek word, the word that they would have been using in that time for forgive, carries with it the notion of sending something away or throwing it away. And so in forgiving the servant's debt, what the master has done here is thrown that debt away, had sent it far away. And that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. But when he forgives the debt, what he's doing is sending it away. And so Jesus, he goes through, and in this moment, he finishes telling Peter, here's what a world of forgiveness looks like. Here's what a way of forgiveness looks like. But he's not done, because then he essentially is launching into, he essentially says, okay, next I'm going to share with you, what does the path of bitterness look like? What does it do to a person? Does it set a person free, or does it do something different? And so he continues, let's see here, let's go 28 through 30. But that slave, the same one who had just had his debt thrown away, that slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. So this is a far smaller, this is about 3 months or so worth of work. 100 denarii. And he seized him and began to choke him, saying, pay back what you owe. So his fellow slave fell to the ground and began to plead with him, saying, have patience with me, and I will repay you. This seems very familiar. We've seen this before, right? This guy should be like, yes, I remember this moment. Have patience with me, and I will repay you. But he, that first servant, was unwilling and went and threw him into prison until he should pay back what was owed. And so we've just seen the master make his choice on which path he's going to follow. and set an example for this servant, this slave, as to maybe if the moment comes in his life that he has to make that choice, what will he do? And lo and behold, that moment comes, and now we're going to watch and see what does that slave do? And that slave, that servant, chooses the different path. He chooses the path of bitterness. He's going to say, you owe me, and I'm not letting it go. You will pay, you will suffer, you will deal with all of it until you make it right with me, until I feel like it's been made right with me. And the question I find myself asking here is, how did we get here? How did he get here? Here's the deal, is I know a lot of us, more than we'd like to admit, we spend some time over in this path, don't we? How do we get there? What were the first couple steps that led down this path of bitterness? And as I read through this and as I thought about it and continued reading, the thing that jumped out at me is this. The first steps down that path of bitterness start when we see the other person as a debt rather than a person. Let me say that again. We see the other as the debt that they owe rather than the person that they are. Because the path of bitterness sees debt rather than people. Think back, reflect. When you think about when you reflect and think about those coworkers, that boss, those family members, that friend, and the people who have hurt you and wounded you and have treated you poorly, upset you, made you angry. When you think about them, do you see the wound they left you with, or do you see a person who has left that wound? And that's a distinction. It's a subtle distinction, but it makes a huge difference. Because when we only see the wound, when we only see what is owed, when we only see the debt and not the human being that is there behind it, regardless of how we feel about them, if we don't see that, there's no motivation, there's no desire for reconciliation, for healing, right? Because all you see is what's owed, not this person that something can be made right with. And when we limit ourselves to seeing only the opportunities, we travel down this path and we see only the opportunities for retribution. I see, like playing soccer, you see only, you can't see the goal around you. All you can see is the person that you want to drill that ball through, that you want to pay back for everything that's happened to you. When we see only that, all we can see, we're limited to the retribution and to the other person getting what we believe they deserve. And here's the thing, the problem with retribution and believing people that get what they deserve and being obsessed with that and seeing only that is that retribution will never ultimately feel like enough because the hurt will still always be there. Desmond Tutu writes about this. He's dealt a lot with forgiveness. If you ever want to read about forgiveness and somebody who's had to navigate that, read Desmond Tutu. And he writes this: if I slap you after you slap me, it does not lessen the sting that I feel on my own face, nor does it diminish my sadness as to the fact that you have struck me. Isn't that profound? You slap me, it still stings no matter how hard I slap you. I slap you back, it doesn't make me any less sad that you wounded me. When we travel down this path of bitterness, it essentially says, I'm never satisfied, and so that person becomes less and less human so that I can hold out for more and more retribution. And what does that ultimately end up doing? It just makes me more and more bitter, and I'm traveling farther and farther down this path. So what are we seeing? And the thing that struck me here is that while the master forgave and threw away the debt, the servant chose to not forgive the debt and throw away the person. And when we start traveling down that path, we can find ourselves doing the very same thing. And so here's the thing. If you're like, man, I'm struggling. I'm down this path. And here's the thing. As we kind of go down this path of bitterness, there's always hope to get on back. Sometimes it just takes a little longer because we've gotten a little farther down it, but there's always hope. And if you're saying, man, I'm starting down this, but I want to be back over here. I hate the way this feels. I want to be back over here. Maybe that first step, if you're struggling to find your way back, maybe the first step is just seeing the person that wounded you. You don't have to excuse them from anything. You don't have to do anything except they are a human being in front of me. Seeing the person that wounded you. Maybe that's the first step. Jesus keeps taking us down this road, though. He wants Peter to really hear what this world looks like. So, where are we? Verse 31. And we'll just go all the way through verse 35 here. So, when his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were deeply grieved and came and reported to their lord, to their master, all that had happened. Then, summoning that first slave, the master, the Lord said to him, "You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not also have had mercy on your fellow slave in the same way that I had mercy on you?" And his Lord, moved with anger, handed him over to the jailers, to the torturers, until he should repay all that was owed him. And then Jesus closes with, "My heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive his brother from your heart." So that's a lot there, but I want to go back. How did the guy end up in jail? He chose not to forgive, right? There was a moment where he could have gone either path. And he chose to go this way. And that path led him straight to jail. His inability to forgive, to step into forgiveness, left him bound and shackled. And I think we can't miss, remember what the king's original desire was? Remember way back in the beginning? His original desire was for this man to live a free and full life. That's what he wants for this man. And yet this servant, it's only when this servant chooses not to forgive, not to see the person, not to live out of the grace and forgiveness that has been extended to him, that he just finds his way in jail, shackled up, chained up. And he could have avoided it entirely, couldn't he? How could he have avoided ending up in jail? Well, he simply had to walk down the other path, to start to forgive. See, here's the thing that I don't want us to miss here, because it doesn't always jump right out, but I don't want us to miss here. From the very start, that servant had the key to his own jail cell. He was his own jailer. He said, "I'm going to walk down this path and put myself in this place." And here's where we start, if we were to draw some application as we kind of come to the end here, maybe there's some things we can start learning from this. Because you know what, I bet we've all got things, we all know, listen, we've all done things in our lives that we know have wounded others, have wounded ourselves, have not been good things, that have broken relationships. We've all done that. But a lot of us in here, most of us in here, as we've walked through that, we've also realized that there is a great big God out there who provides a whole lot of forgiveness and a whole lot of grace for all of what we've ever done and whatever we'll do. And so maybe one of the first steps, how do I get down this path? How do I start here? Is remember your own forgiveness. And find the gratitude from that. Remember the joy that comes from not having to carry that burden and that debt anymore. Because gratitude is a lot different than guilt. I'm not saying for you to dwell on the guilt of all the bad things you've done. What I'm asking us to do is to say, man, that's amazing that I got to experience that love and that freedom. So if you want to walk the path of forgiveness, recognize how much you are forgiven. And I bet if I would ask you, because I know I love that I'm forgiven. I love the feeling of that, the freedom of that. And I bet you love that as well. And so as I'm thinking about this, the thing that I love, I want that for the people in my lives, whether they've hurt me or not. At the end of the day, if I've been called to follow Christ, what I want is that thing that I love, I want for others around me. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions I asked you at the very beginning. When you think of your own life, who do you struggle to forgive? What happens when you start to bask and celebrate and remember with deep gratitude the forgiveness that you've received? In your own life, what is it that you struggle to forgive? How does deep gratitude for your own forgiveness change that? Second thing is, what do you need to let go of? What are your hands clenched so tightly to that you need to let go of? A couple years ago, my family, we went down to the Southern Arizona Historical Society, I think is what it's called. It's the Arizona History Museum down by the U of A. And this probably won't come as a shock to you, but if it's Arizona history, there's a lot of Old West stuff. And so you go down there and it's just a lot of Old Western stuff. And so we get to walk through the whole thing and it's what you would expect. You walk in, there's a stagecoach there. You get to check out the stagecoach. There's here's how they lived back then. One of the highlights for a lot of people is that they have this big giant replica of like an underground copper mine, which I think is terrifying. And I will never go in there because the mannequins are in there and they move. Just saying. You go one time and they're never in the same spot. And I've seen their eyes move too. It's not good. And so they've got that whole thing, and my 9-year-old son, because he's far braver than me, will walk through that 3 or 4 times and say how cool it is, but I'm staying outside. And then the last room that you go through, the last room before the gift shop, is this room that's kind of set up like an old jailhouse. And you walk in and there's the sheriff's desk and all his like sheriffy stuff. And then in the corner, there's this little jail cell, a single jail cell. And inside the cell, it's big enough for a bed, a cot, and maybe a couple other things that they would give to prisoners. And so my family is in there, and my youngest son sees us, and he goes over, and the door's open, and he goes over, walks into the jail cell, and he closes it. And he stands there for a bit, and I'm like, cool. He's exploring the space, really figuring it out, really learning all he can about the Old West. And he goes in there, and he closes the door, and after a while, we're off looking at something else in the room, and I hear him say, hey, come let me out. And I was like, what do you mean come? There's no lock on the door, man. Like in my head, like, you can do it. You can get out just fine. You just open the door. You're good. And then I keep going back and talking some more and looking at some other things. And then, hey, come let me out. Come here. You're joking with me right now, right? Like you just want me to play this game with you because like the door can be opened, right? And then, third time, holding on to the bars. Come let me out. And it's just, I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. Just open the door and come out. You got to let go of the bars, but open the door and come out. You let yourself in there, let yourself out. And here's the thing. Some of us are that way in life as well, aren't we? Some of us are holding tightly to the bars of a jail cell we put ourselves in. And all we have to do is let go and open the door. There's not even a lock. Just push it open. Sometimes I wonder if God looks at us the same way and says, you don't need to worry. You can do it yourself. You've got it. You can take that step. I've not locked you in there. I've made you in such a way that you can actually get out. And you see, here's the thing. When it comes to resentment and bitterness is the cage that we lock ourselves into, but there's no lock. And I think that's the story. When I look at what Jesus is saying in this parable, in this story, I think it's exactly what he's saying. He's saying, God is saying, there's no lock, just come out. It's okay, just come out. Let go of the bars, walk the path of forgiveness, and let go of the bitterness. And when I encourage us to let go of the bitterness, here's the thing I want us all to hear very quickly. It is not because, we don't let go of the bitterness because what that person did was okay, but because it's not okay for you to live in a cage. What they didn't do, that's not okay. But what's even more not okay is for you to find yourself locked up in a cage. That's not what you were meant for, friends. It's not what I was meant for. It's not what we were meant for when we follow God. And I know in here, for some of you, you've been holding on to that bitterness for a really long time because it was a deep hurt. And you know what it's like to have your hand wrapped around that thing because you've been practicing holding it for a long time because it hurt a lot. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to let it go. I want you to open your hand. I want you to practice letting it go. Practice taking a step down that path of forgiveness as opposed to that path of bitterness. And you know what? Here's what you're going to find. You're going to find that today, maybe tomorrow, some days, it's going to be easy to walk around with an open hand and let that thing go. But then there's going to be a day where something bad happens, where you run into that person, where it's just a rough day, and all of a sudden, without even realizing it, your hand clenches back up and you grab onto that bar of bitterness again. And I want to tell you that's okay. It's okay. A lot of us have spent a long time holding on to that, and it's going to take some practice opening our hands up, and hopefully they stay open a little bit longer each time. And here's the beauty of it. Here's what that practice does. Here's what it does to open our hands, to let go, is that it moves you out of that path of bitterness and more, day by day, into the path of forgiveness. And that, my friends, reflects the heart of God for us and the heart of God for the people around us and the world that we all live in and share. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for showing us the right path to follow. Thank you for equipping us and encouraging us and letting us see how we can step down that path of forgiveness. We ask that you allow us to in moments of difficulty, reflect with gratitude on the forgiveness you've shown us. We thank you that all of that is rooted in the Son that you sent for us. So we thank you for your Son, and we thank you for the love that you show us. In your name, amen.